Welcome back, everyone, to the Canadian Baseball Network podcast. We are now just hours away from the Toronto Blue Jays home opener against the Baltimore Orioles. It's an exciting time to be a baseball fan, Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, this is what it's all about, right? Like you watch all of spring training and, go through all the off season, and the baseball off season drags on more than other leagues, right? Because there's no Canada Day, free agent frenzy. Even the NFL feels like free agency flies by. So you kind of have this real dry period. If you're a huge baseball fan like we are, and like many of you are, it's disappointing and it's a long winter. So it is fantastic to be back. The spring brings a ton of optimism. And frankly, Matt, I'm pretty optimistic about this team this year too. The Jays, that is.
Yeah, I think everyone's optimistic. I think the Chicago White Sox are even optimistic at this point in time. But yeah, there's lots to like about this Blue Jays team. But I like to say cautiously optimistic because there are some question marks. We've discussed it a little bit on our last live stream about the lineup, and we're going to dive into that. But there's a lot of things to like too. Starting with the news that Max Scherzer is likely to start Game 3 against Baltimore on Saturday. That's obviously good news for the team.
Oh, it's terrific, right? Because, one of the bigger storylines of spring after, of course, the Vlad extension talks and what Alan Rodin has been doing was Scherzer's thumb, right? How is it going to be? Always injury concerns when you bring in a pitcher of this age. But I think it was Avery of Gate 14 who talked about how for him, this is like the Joey Votto signing last year. And remember how Joey Votto went? Obviously, different circumstances. He was Canadian. He's from the area, so he had that component. But that was so disappointing last year, right? When Votto never actually got on the field. You didn't want that to be kind of the same thing with Scherzer, and it's looking great, Matt. I mean, having a future Hall of Famer on the mound every 5 days is going to be such a treat.
Yeah, I mean, even if this team, and the Jays fans don't want to hear this right now, but even if this team, underachieves or misses the playoffs and Scherzer can make 25, 30 starts, it's something you look back on, years down the road saying, hey, that was pretty cool that Max Scherzer pitched for the Blue Jays, like Roger Clemens, right? Roger Clemens pitched for the Blue Jays. That was cool, despite them not really doing anything during that, I think it was 97, 98 seasons. But it's definitely a cool moment to have him as part of the rotation for sure.
And you hope it goes better. Like I'm thinking of other, leagues or sports too. Like when Hakeem Olajuwon went to the Raptors, didn't work out so well, but you hope that, I think with Scherzer too, pitchers in general, you would know this, Matt, pitchers don't really get worse. They more break, you know what I mean? So if he's healthy, should be great. And it seems like he's really dialed in. He really wants to be in Toronto. I don't know about you, Matt, but just getting Scherzer to sign here for me felt like a nice, subtle accomplishment for this front office, who at times has had trouble getting good players to take their money.
Well, especially knowing kind of what he's like as a player and how intense he is and how important winning is, it's almost kind of like, oh, maybe fans aren't seeing something that he is in this team. Obviously, the rotation I think I'd call it the best in the American League East, especially with the Yankees without Heel and Cole. But yeah, I mean, if they say pitching and defense wins championships, that's what the Blue Jays have been, banking on the last few years. It hasn't worked out. You got to hit some 3-run home runs, but they also addressed that in the offseason. So yeah, I think this is going to be interesting. I think they're going to be in the race, all the way through.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the rotation. For me, I agree with you. I think it's a fantastic rotation. I think the biggest thing is just health, right? But that's any rotation, right? You see it with, obviously you mentioned the Yankees. I think you look around the division. Yeah, the Rays will always have good pitching, but they feel like they're in a tough spot with everything that's happened with them and their stadium and stuff. Baltimore's rotation certainly doesn't scare you. Their lineup might, but I was so surprised that they didn't go and add more pitching. But
yeah.
For me, the Boston rotation is one that really, it's a little unproven, but it should be really good, right? They go out and add Garrett Crochet, Walker Buehler. I feel like that'll be good. And I think Boston this year, by and large, is going to be better. But still lots of question marks with Boston because they're a younger team. And Walker Buehler has a history of injuries as well, as does Garrett Crochet. So lots of unknowns there around the AL East for sure.
Well, that's the thing with the AL East is like I don't think anyone jumps off the page necessarily. I mean, there's some very good teams in the division, obviously, but all 5 teams I think are good. And that's kind of what makes it interesting. The Jays could win 75 games or they could win 90. We've talked about that in the past, but with the wild card set up now and the structure of the playoffs, there's no reason this Blue Jays team shouldn't be in it, playing meaningful baseball in September. I know that's kind of going back pre-2015. That's what Blue Jays fans are looking for, meaningful baseball in September. But I think that should be the case, barring injuries and if guys can stay healthy.
Well, I think too, like you look around the division, you look around even this team. Shapiro mentioned it last year. They want to be playing meaningful games in September. We talked about that on the show, like how disappointing and difficult that was to hear, because that's the bar. But I think he probably would want to reword that if given a second chance. I think more what he was getting to is a little bit that each year he wants to be competitive, basically, is what he was trying to say there. And I, last year was a huge setback in that way. But at the same time, they had a lot of underperformance, a lot of injuries as well, a lot of bad luck in some ways. Now here we go. I'm already trying to be optimistic.
You're already putting that out there, eh? You're
yeah. Already saying it was all bad luck last year. It was just a blip. But here's the thing: the start for them is huge, right? Like we talk about September. If you're gonna get to September, you got to get through this April stretch and at least keep your head above water, right? Because we talked about in the live stream. I'm sure we'll get it to here in a second. It'll be a theme kind of early on in the season for the Jays. How tough the schedule is for them, right? They have divisional opponents, like they have Baltimore early. They have the Red Sox again, Orioles again early. Like they have really tough opponents. They have Atlanta, Seattle, Houston, Yankees, Mets. Those are all good teams this year, right? Now, again, baseball's a weird sport. Maybe Seattle doesn't get off to a good start. Maybe the Mets, with all that money, maybe they don't get off to a good start. But the point is, like, if you're the Jays, you don't really kind of have a choice. If you want to be playing those games in September, well, a big part of that is making sure you kind of keep your head above water, at least through the first couple months of the season.
Well, I mean, they always say you don't win the division in April, but you sure can lose it. So if they come out and go 8 and 9 games under 500, that's a serious problem. If they hover around 500 through a month, I think that's, more than good enough given the difficulty of their schedule. No Gunnar Henderson opening weekend. That's obviously a plus for the Blue Jays. A down for baseball fans in general.
Yeah.
Everyone loves watching him play, but for the Blue Jays specifically, that's going to certainly take a little bit of the edge out of the Orioles lineup. Again, we talked about their starting rotation. I don't love it. But yeah, again, if you can, hover around that 500 mark especially after this April, you just named off some of those teams. I think they'll probably take that.
And like, if you can get into a May and June feeling good about yourself, they have a lot of road games, but like they have the White Sox in June, they have the Cardinals in June, the A's at the end of May. We'll see what those teams are like. The Diamondbacks, these are just fine teams, but there's some games, and just by and large, as you get into the season, hopefully, you're in a position where you've been able to stay around 500 if you're the Jays, and you can start to push yourself ahead a little bit, make a push as the summer, heats up. Big question for me, you mentioned the rotation. The depth for me is still a concern. Ryan Yarbrough, it was a bit of a hoopla because Richard Lovelady and who was Jacob Barnes made the bullpen out of spring. Yarbrough was allowed elected free agency and went to the Yankees, of course. He went to the Yankees. I don't think it's the end of the world. Yarbrough versus Lovelady is the lefty, because I think they want Yariel to be the long guy. But for me, Matt, still a concern is the depth here with this rotation. If they get one or two injuries, it's not pretty.
Yeah, and I think the depth just based on age. I think we've talked about this as well. 3 guys over 30, Scherzer over 40. So I think that's kind of the concern, is what happens as you get older. You usually start breaking down a little bit more. And if that starts to happen for this team, if that happens to anyone, if anyone loses, 2 or 3, especially starters, I mean, you're in deep trouble. But this team certainly can't afford to have that happen, just simply because I don't think the lineup makes up the difference.
Yeah, like I think the theme we're getting at here, both with the schedule and with health, is there's not a lot of margin for error, right? Like and then you get to the bullpen lineup, like same thing. Like if the bullpen's shaky out of the gate and they're blowing games, like that's obviously every team in baseball wants their bullpen to be locked down. But given the nature of the start of the year, like you're going to need Hoffman and Garcia and Sandlin and Chad Green to not only be healthy, but money for the most part, because they're not going to have these big leads for the most part against those teams, right? It's going to be.
And you're going to need length out of your starters because
Yes.
there's going to be games already in this stretch where, a guy gets, pulled after three
Yeah.
and a third or 4 innings
Yeah.
just because one, it's early in the season. Pitch counts will still be monitored. Two, you're playing some pretty good lineups.
Yeah.
So it's just bound to happen. You're probably going to get your
Yeah.
tail handed to you a couple times, at least in this stretch. So so you need some length out of these starters, which is directly tied to health.
And that's where Yarborough would have fit in nicely, right? It's kind of a mop-up innings eater. Who claims that role? Is it Lovelady? Can he go multiple innings? I don't know, right? Is it Yariel? I think Yariel's role on this team is going to be really interesting to follow this year because obviously he started last year, mixed results. He was a reliever in Japan. It worked really well for him. He kind of seems like he has that kind of bulldog mentality that would work in a one inning kind of. I think his stuff would play up. I don't know about you. I thought his stuff would really play up in one inning, coming out sixth, seventh inning, whatever. But if he ends up being used as kind of a long relief, innings eating kind of spot start kind of guy, that also changes the look of the bullpen a little bit too. So that's going to be interesting to see. And I think that's what brings a lot of curiosity to why Yarborough didn't make the team. As you mentioned, there will be some games where you just need some mop up. So it'll be interesting to see there. Again, we're laboring about the last man in the bullpen when by and large the team will be dictated by Bichette's health, Vlad's health, Gosman's health, Kirk's health, right?
Yeah, and I think we sound like Toronto Maple Leafs inside. Talking about the fourth center,
Exactly.
center on the fourth line. But yeah, and I agree with Yariel. I think it's his stuff will play out. Most guys do. Most big league guys do when they go to the bullpen because they don't have to worry about going to the order a third, fourth time, right? They can just let it fly, let it eat their best stuff for an inning, or in his case, maybe two or three. So it's going to be interesting to see because he was in the rotation a lot last year and with mixed results. So I'm curious to see if this rotation can stay healthy and he can kind of serve that role of the long guy, so to speak, just how he looks, and it'll keep him lengthened out should there be an injury later in the year.
Right. And that's a good point. And that's something that could very well happen, right? And depending on how the season goes, if it goes south, maybe you're selling on a couple starters and he's in the rotation to kind of see what you got next year as well,
We're
right?
already going there, right? We're already
Yeah, well,
first pitch hasn't even flown and we're already going there. We're already jumping to July 31st.
on one hand, I'm optimistic. On the other hand, I am a little scarred from last year at how much hope I had and how
Well,
much
that's our
things went
job, right?
well.
We got to see both sides of it.
Yeah.
We certainly do. I think you've shown that.
But yeah, I mean, it really could go either way. And then I think that brings us kind of to, the lineup as well, because while we talk about the rotation and the bullpen and Yarborough versus Lovelady, like a lot of this season will come down to health, of course, as any team does, but also like how well Vlad performs, Bo Bichette, Santander in his first year here in Toronto. What can you squeeze out at a couple of these young guys,
I
right?
think. Sorry, just to touch on Bichette because I
No,
think
go.
that's a huge piece of all this. Rob Longley of the Toronto Sun had a really good piece on him. Sat down with him at spring training. He seems super motivated. I don't like I said a million times before, I don't read too much into spring training stats, but he looked locked in during spring training. I think he's in for a big year. Something I found interesting, John Schneider said the other day, which maybe he was listening to me because when I was talking on this live stream the other day, I said I don't like them hitting 1 through 3, them being Bichette, Guerrero, and Santander. I think I'd like to lengthen it a little bit. So I believe it was Kevin Barker asked him on Blair and Barker about where he sees Bichette hitting, and he said 1 or 4, depending on the matchup. So that's a lot to ask to go from the 1 hole to the 4, all the different roles in the lineup, so to speak. But if he hits 4th, who hits first is my question.
Will Wagner, maybe?
That's exactly where I was going with that. I think I wouldn't be surprised to see Will Wagner hitting leadoff opening day.
What about against lefties, though? I don't think they face a ton of lefties first month, but you could probably go Bichette against lefties. He's so good against them.
Yeah, you go Bichette against lefties, and then I guess Kirk or Clement in the 4 hole. Then you have 4.
Oh,
righties.
no, but yeah, I mean, I'm thinking like you can also, I mean, that's where, yeah, like an Ernie Clement can step up, right? And maybe, I mean, that's where, Keegan was talking about it a lot this spring, less so later on, but where an Aurelvis Martinez could be interesting.
Yeah.
Where a Davis Schneider could be interesting against lefties. And it looks like with Schneider, I mean, that probably is what he'll be doing a lot, is hitting against lefties.
Dalton
And ideally,
Varsho, I think, is the natural choice. Not lefty righty aside. Dalton Varsho is probably the natural choice for 4 if they want to go 1 through 3 with those 3 big guys. But Obviously, he's not available early on, but yeah, I think it's not the 4 hole isn't set in stone unless it's Bichette. I don't love Bichette hit 4 either, to be honest with you. I think he's more of a 1-2 guy, and then you slide Guerrero 3, Santander 4. But they pay John Schneider to make those decisions, and they pay me to sit here and talk about it.
I think it's interesting because Bichette does bring a lot of skills that you would like in a leadoff hitter, right? I mean, the leadoff hitter has changed a lot in baseball, but the guy gets on base. He can steal a base. He can also hit for power. He's a guy he's just one of your best hitters. But I don't know, like I feel like a Will Wagner could look really, really nice as a leadoff hitter against righties, and then you figure it out against lefties. Maybe you go Bichette and you figure that out.
I just think his bat to ball skills, Wagner. I think he puts the ball in play a lot. Kind of what you're looking for, a leadoff guy. He'll work in that bat. You just need to get on for those 3 big guys, because that is the crux of this offense, is those 3 guys. And if those 3 guys produce and the pitching does what it's supposed to, now you're talking. If those 3 guys, one of those 3 guys doesn't do their job, they're in trouble. It's a thin offensive line that they're walking going into the season.
I think about Kirk too, and he's had a nice spring as well. I think one thing I thought about him last year with his at the plate, just looked slow, looked like he was kind of like swinging underwater. Do you know what I mean? He looks a bit more powerful this year. I think, frankly, he looks healthier. He had a good offseason, clearly. He gets the big extension of 5 years, $58 million, I think, that buys out some ARB. I mean, the Jays at this point kind of need Kirk to be good and have a bounce back. They're going to be wishing for that because he's their guy this year. They didn't go out and get another catcher. It's him and Heineman. So he's going to really get a lot of run. I think that could be good for him. Health, a huge thing for him as well. But by and large, he stayed pretty healthy in his career so far. And I think he could be a guy, as the season goes on, maybe he is hitting 6th. Maybe he, in against certain pitchers, maybe he all of a sudden is hitting 5th, because the guy, if you have a runner at 3rd, less than 2 out on this team, who do you want to play? You want, obviously, Bichette, Vlad, Santander. But after that, Kirk's a guy with great bat to ball skills and a good eye.
Yeah, I think on the defensive side, the ball speaks for itself. He's an elite defender and catcher. I think the big question for me is, because don't forget, there was a time last year where people thought, like you said, he really slowed down. Can he handle the 115, 120 games behind the plate? What does that look like from an offensive standpoint? And he had, I think, 5 home runs last year. Yeah. So when I mentioned him potentially in the 4 hole, that's not exactly it's raising eyebrows, just not for the right way. But it's the big thing for me is seeing him in July. He's the number 1 guy now. They're paying him to be the number 1 guy going forward. So we'll see how he can kind of handle that workload from a physical standpoint, and how does he slow down? Obviously, catching is a tough position. No one's expecting him to go hit 30 home runs, but they're going to need something out of his bat too, unfortunately. I think a little bit more than maybe they would like to expect out of it.
Absolutely. And I think if you do get, a nice season out of him, like a closer to a 2022, right, where he walked more than he struck out, 415 slugging, 285 average. He was nice, 372 on base, a 129 WRC plus. Like, if you can get that plus everything he provides defensively, he's one of the best catchers in baseball, right? There's not very many catchers in baseball who hit these days.
No, I mean, he's one of the best back there. It seems like the pitchers love him. So, defensively, he's worth the value alone. But again, this lineup can't afford to have a dead spot in it at any point this season if they want to compete, especially in this division.
I'm looking at these young guys too and thinking which one of them can step up over the season. Obviously, Barger option to AAA, which I think made some sense, primarily just because of the Varsho injury. You need some depth at center field, of course, and they obviously don't want Springer to play much center field. So Barger kind of the odd man out, partially because of, other guys stepping up like Roden and, Davis Schneider clearly earned his spot in the team. So it'll be interesting to see. Like, I still think Barger plays a lot of games for the Jays this year. And I think once Varsho comes back, who knows what happens to Nathan Lucas? Like, maybe he gets DFA'd, the roster shakeup there. I think they just want Barger to play a lot. But the guys in the big league team, like Roden, I think Roden's been obviously a big story all spring. I just whacked my mic because I'm so excited about Alan Roden. Like I think
Matheson. He's been talking about Alan Roden for years. So
yeah,
just kudos to him.
yeah, and like he picked Spencer Horwitz last year too. Remember we asked him for a player, who do you think is gonna? Well, I think it's Spencer Horwitz, and he had a great year, right? Yeah, I think Roden, and he's mentioned that Roden is a lot like Horwitz, right? Maybe a little more speed, maybe a little more power, but similar approach. And yeah, I mean, he's a guy too, like Roden. He's going to be playing almost a good chunk of the time, especially because he'll play against righties.
Yeah, and I think I was sitting here yesterday, watching the game, the Pirates game. So this was on Sunday, and I'm thinking, what if Alan Roden is close to what he was during spring training?
Yeah,
like that changes the look of the lineup. I'm not saying he's going to hit 400. I'm not saying that 1200 OPS, but what if he's 280, hits 20, 25 home runs, drives in 8? Like that changes the look. 800, high 700 OPS. That changes the look of this line a little bit. Will Wagner can fill in that leadoff spot, slide everybody down. Varsho comes back. He could be the key to this thing, depending on, he's going to get off to a good start because, there's going to be roster implications when Varsho comes back. But, who knows? I mean, it wouldn't be the first time a guy kind of bursts on the scene and makes an impact for a team.
A lot of intrigue because of that, because they need one of these young guys to come up and be an impact player, right? Keegan's talked about it a bunch, and a lot of people have, about how their farm system has produced some depth, hasn't produced a lot of stars outside of Bichette and Vlad, who were always blue chips, right? They have some guys down there who could be, like Arjun Amala looks really, really good at 19, but he's a long ways away still.
And
right?
even if he's not a star, I mean, what if he's what if he hits sixth?
Oh yeah, that's fantastic.
Is a above average big league hitter,
especially this year, right?
Yeah.
And Schneider, I think, said, it was yesterday or today, he thinks that Roden can be an impact player down the stretch for them. Of course, he's going to say that, but just kind of throw that stuff out there. For Atkins to call out Roden before the spring training, for how good he played, for Schneider to be doing this, for him to make the team, over guys like Bart. I mean, it's impressive. First of all, Roden's been able to do, but clearly the Jays are very, very high on him. And, we talked a little bit about during the live about Springer versus Roden and how that should go. I think you see how the first month kind of shakes out.
Yeah, I think there's some pressure on George Springer here.
Yeah.
I don't think this is like, he got extended run last year in the leadoff spot. There were people crying bloody murder saying get him out of the leadoff spot. Schneider kind of stuck with him for a long time. I don't see that happening this year as far as, sticking with him. I think he's obviously going to be a part of this team on opening day and through the first few months, but he's got to produce something of value, because there's some guys here that they are, fighting for these spots.
And I think that's maybe a big reason as to why, they've had to really kind of deal with Springer's aging curve in not ideal circumstances, right? Like his first couple of years, he was hurt here. And then when he's been healthy, he's had flashes, he's had good Julys, a lot of overall disappointing play. And I think that this whole leadoff conversation could have been rendered moot if Springer, and still, by the way, could be, if Springer hits well and gets off to a nice start, which based on his spring, you doubt, but spring is weird. You never know. If he gets off to a nice start, he might just hop right back up into the leadoff spot. Like, it feels like Schneider kind of wants Springer still to hit leadoff, but he just can't do it because then he'll probably lose his job.
Yeah.
He's going on.
He's still George. He might, there might still be something there. Who knows? And that would be absolutely the biggest bonus I think the Jays could get at this point in time. Yeah. Would be to get anything offensively out of George Springer. Like you said, I don't, and we talked about this, I don't think they anticipated the fall off the cliff to come quite so soon, or happen quite so quickly with George Springer. But, again, it's spring training. Let's not read too much into it. Roden had a 1,200 something OPS and Springer didn't do much, but things can change come Thursday.
Still makes me mad, Matt, that they gave Kiermaier all that money last offseason when they had Varsho and still Springer. Like, I understand you want to protect Springer's health and stuff. You're paying him how much money and he can't play center field anymore? Like, I don't know. That's tough for me. That's really tough. At least on a part-time basis, you had to go get Kevin Kiermaier. And I don't know. I'm still riled about that because I like Kiermaier as a guy, and I know he's with the team now as a outfield roaming coordinator or whatever. And that's a fantastic story. He's a good dude and everyone loves him and he's really good looking and the whole deal. But they didn't need, if Springer was aging better, and if they trusted Varsho to play center, that wouldn't have been a thing. This year, right? You've got Miles Straw, you've got Nathan Lucas. Like, they just don't want him to play center field at all.
No, that's what I was just about to say, that they don't want him. And I know he played in the last spring training game just to get him up. I think it was his first time this spring playing center field. But you're carrying Lucas and Straw. There's no way he's coming close to center field, barring an emergency.
Yeah. So that's a lot to pay a corner outfielder who doesn't hit for a lot of power.
Yeah, I would say so. But
that's where Alan Roden comes in, though, right? Ideally, Roden provides some of that competition. And maybe by July, Springer's playing twice a week.
Yeah, that's a lot for $25 million or whatever he's making. It's a lot for.
Sure is. He better be a good locker room guy, and I think he is. But
it's like the Scherzer making 15 starts for $15 million. But yeah, we'll wait and see. Let's not go too far down the rabbit hole. One guy I am really looking forward to see, aside from Alan Roden, I think he's probably what I'm looking forward to the most, to see how he adjusts to the big leagues after such a strong spring, is Bo Bichette. I think he's going to have a monster year, which is going to either cost the Blue Jays or cost someone else a lot of money come the off season.
Yeah, and he's such an easy guy to root for. Health, such a big thing with him. I mean, it's been a big conversation in the off season, just trying to compare last year's team to this and like how much better can they be. Well, if you have a healthy Bichette and a motivated Bichette, look out. Right? Who's to say he can't be a top 5 shortstop in baseball this year? Top 3?
He absolutely can. And I think he's going to. I really do. I think he's going to have a big year. I think Vladdy's going to have a very good year. Santander hopefully can have a good year again. And, does that give you enough offensively with the rest of the guys in the lineup? Clement's been impressive, but, you don't necessarily want him hitting 4. You want him producing a 6 or 7 spot.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of question marks around this lineup, but again, we've said it before. We keep saying this, that we've said it before, but they're going to need something out of 4 to 9 or 5 to 9 in the leadoff spot around those guys to have success, even with the starting rotation being one of the best.
Yeah, and that's where we get to that conversation like we talked about with Roden, with some of these other guys. When Barger comes up, who can step up? Maybe Kirk has a bounce back here. Like, you need guys to step up. And if they don't get that, like if they have a combination of injuries, poor play, decline again from Springer, Bichette gets hurt again, whatever, like, well, then you're screwed, right? you're royally screwed, because no margin for error. That's the theme this year, really, especially early on. No margin for error. And that lineup is going to be tested as well. You're going up against good teams, good arms, right? Yes, the Yankees don't have Garrett Cole, but still, you're going up against like Atlanta, right? There's some good arms over there, right? Seattle, right? Boston, like we talked about, they should be a lot better. Like Cleveland. These are teams with really good pitching. So that's where, too, like the health is so important this year. Right. And like that was a huge issue for them last year. Of course, health is, obviously you can't really blame the team too much. People like to do that, but you can't really blame a team for injuries. It happens. But it just goes to show, like, you could have a season, getting into the weeds maybe a little bit here, but things go well. They just get too many injuries and they miss the playoffs by 5 games. And that's the story of the season. If they were healthier, they would have made it.
So let's get to the big question.
Yeah.
Does this team make the playoffs?
Yeah, they do. Yeah. They're going to go out. Okay, they're going to tread water in the first half. They're going to go out and add a piece or 2 at the deadline. And because Atkins is playing for his job, they will, well, we'll see about that. I think they will be a little more, risky with some of the prospects they deal. I'm not saying Arjun Amal is on the table, but I think guys below that could certainly be, right? Like, even on the pitching side, some of the guys they acquired at the deadline last year, right? Like that McAdoo, some of these other prospects, right? Who's to say they don't just end up shipping a bunch of them out for some hitters at the deadline? All that to say, I think they have a nice second half. They play meaningful games in September, which is so important. And I think that they do much more than meaningful games in September. I think they make the postseason as a wild card team. After that, hard to predict from there. But
I'll say final wild card team or first team out, I think is kind of where you're looking. I just look at the American League. Are they better than Baltimore? Are they better than Boston? I don't think so.
Probably
Are they
not.
better than the Yankees? I don't think so. They're better than, I think they're better than the Rays.
Yeah.
The AL Central was the wild card last year.
Yeah.
With 3 teams making it. And then the West, who knows? I mean, Texas is probably going to be better. Seattle did nothing really on the offensive side in the offseason, but has the best pitching in baseball. Houston, who knows about them, right? Like, you got Jose Altuve.
They should be good.
Field, but they still should be good.
Yeah.
So it's they're going to have to play well wire to wire to get in.
The Tigers are a better team. The Tigers are a way better team. And yes, important to remember too, if the White Sox lose 120 games again, then those central teams like the Royals and Cleveland, the Tigers, they get so many bonus wins that the Jays likely won't get because you don't have that kind of basement dweller in the AL East, right? Even in the West, like the A's, right? Like they'll probably be a little better maybe in Sacramento first year, a little bit of a buzz there. I think they're trying to compete, right? They spent some money or trying to compete. I mean, they added Luis Severino and a couple other players, but the point is, like, if the White Sox aren't as bad and the A's aren't quite as bad, maybe there's something there, like maybe you can, eke out a playoff spot. But Matt, like the more we're talking about it, like it's going to be tough, right? They will need some great performances. If you get a young guy or two to step up, that changes things, right? If you get a really healthy Scherzer who can give you 20 to 25 starts and the rest of the rotation stays mostly healthy, those are a lot of ifs, but you could see it too, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you're watching this, you're watching me flip through my phone through Major League Baseball. I'm looking at all the teams. It's going to be tight. It's going to be interesting. As we wrap this up, I guess I'll put you on the spot. We didn't talk about this beforehand. What's your World Series and who wins it?
Oh, good question. Wow, you are putting me on the spot here. Let me think on that for a second. Okay, so I think first off, I would still go back to like Dodgers for the National League. I'm not going to overthink that. The Dodgers are the best team. They got better, and I can't see any team outside of maybe the Mets, if they're healthy, take a run at the Dodgers. Okay, although like San Francisco, I have a soft spot for them. You never know. The AL is wide open. Wide open. Give me Cleveland. Give me Cleveland.
Cade Smith, Eric Sabrowski, and Bo Naylor.
Yeah. In the Cleveland against the Dodgers.
I would be okay with watching that. Yeah. I think Josh Naylor would be a little bit pissed off.
Oh, big time.
I am going to overthink it. I'm not going to take the Dodgers.
Wow.
Because I think it's so hard to repeat. We haven't had one in 25-something years.
True.
So I'm going to take Atlanta.
Oh, nice.
And Boston.
Oh, that's a good one. The East Coast World Series.
And I'll take – I'm going to hate – Blue Jays fans are going to hate this. I'll take the Boston Red Sox to win the World Series.
Wow. The Red Sox. Crochet from the south side to Boston wins a ring in his first year.
And we'll just delete this when that doesn't happen.
Alex Bregman back with back in the postseason, going up against Atlanta in the World Series. Yeah, you know what? That's a fun one. They're a good team, man.
And I like Atlanta. You can never doubt Alex Anthopoulos. I mean, Spencer Strider's going to make his way back in that rotation. Yeah. I know they lost Fried, but there's still enough there, I think, to get it done. Matt, it's just a really good lineup. So
terrific.
It's going to be so hard for the Dodgers to repeat, even with how good they are. I mean, you get to October and you get a 5-7 game series,
And health for the Dodgers too. They got a lot of injury-prone guys in that rotation. Right?
Yep.
And if their star gets hurt, knock on wood, no one wants to see that. But again, injuries happen to everybody. But like the Dodgers rotation is kind of pretty injury-prone, and they could be in a really rocky spot depending on how that goes. So I totally get that. And repeating is really hard when you're pitching into November, right? And then you have this turnaround, then you got to do it again. Even if you did add some guys, it's really, really hard. So I totally understand that. By the way, I didn't pick a winner between Dodgers and Cleveland. Dodgers. After all saying all that.
Not Cade Smith getting the final out.
That's a good one. Yeah. Sabrowski with the setup. Smith, yeah, Clase, I guess, is out of the favor at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. He struggled last postseason, so say it happened again, and Smith takes it over. But
There you go. I like that. Oh, one more for you. I got a prediction for you, and we didn't talk about this either. Who's your MVP, National League and American League?
I'm gonna go
Really
Bobby Witt Jr.
Nice
in the American League. Oh God, the National League. It's so hard to go against Ohtani, especially if he comes back and pitches at all. Mookie Betts has this weird sickness. I would go him, but who knows how that's going to linger. And oh God, Kyle Tucker.
Nice. That's a fun one.
Let's go with
that. That's a fun one.
Again, we'll just delete it if it didn't. I never said this.
All right, give me. I got a weird one. I'm going Adley Rutschman in the American League, and I'm going with same thing. National League's tricky. Ohtani is, of course, an easy answer. Any Dodger is like such a easy cop out because I already picked them for the World Series. I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to go with someone a little more fun. I'm thinking I'm going to go with Austin Riley.
Ooh, for the World Series bound.
No, just for NL MVP.
No, I know, but for the World Series bound Atlanta Braves, in my opinion.
Yeah. You got it.
If Austin Riley has an MVP caliber season, that's only bolstering my chances of my prediction coming correct. So I'm good with that.
There you go.
Okay, well, we're just hours away from the Jays' home opener against the Baltimore Orioles at Rogers Center. A long season, and we'll be along for the ride with plenty of content throughout the season, hopefully well into October. Until next time, take care.